Hi everyone, welcome. I'm preparing to check in on these two gray tubs with the red wigglers in them. And during the last check-in, I even made reference to a sense of deja vu I was feeling. I even named the video referring to the deja vu sense that I was feeling because it was the pair of black tubs right next to them that I had fed just before, and there were so many similarities, but you know, there's obviously a different colored tub over here. The black tubs have my so-called original red wigglers in them, and there's paper coverings versus plastic coverings, so there are distinct differences, but today I think we are going to do away with one of the differences, which is the plastic coverings. I think we're going to go with paper coverings on the gray tubs today. And well, as long as there's deja vu and similarities, it seemed to me like the information board I had set up for feeding the original red wigglers yesterday was so close to being valid for these systems I would just reuse it. Simply scratching out the word original, since these are red wigglers as well. The age is pretty close, only 10 days difference. So these are now 122 days. This system over here was 132 days when I fed them, and even the number of feedings are very similar. We're up to, well, they've been fed 10 times. We're feeding number 11 today, and even the pause in between the most recent check-in and now is the same 20 days. So I'm going to get these bins up on the bench, and we're going to get them fed. So let's get to work. The replacement top covering newspaper sheets are all set to go when we're done. When I'm removing these plastic coverings, I just want to take care not to accidentally strand any worms that could be stuck to them. I mean, I did position them in a way that they were kind of crinkled up, allowing for some airflow beneath them, so that maybe they would be a little bit drier below if they were set up that way versus being laid down flat where there'd be a good deal of moisture beneath them. So I don't see any wormies on this one, and I believe once that plastic has had a chance to dry off a little bit, I'll be able to much more easily shake off the castings that have adhered to them. This one seems to be a little bit more damp. I could feel it right away just in the weight of it. But here too, I don't see worms. For that matter, I don't see worms on the top surface of either system either. So yeah, I think we're safe. I will take another look. These systems were clearly already showing signs of possibly having a little bit more moisture than they need. That was the reason the plastic was positioned a little bit inboard from the outer edges and crinkled up. It was already kind of forecasted in my mind that removal of the plastic coverings would be coming up soon. One thing we did do was we placed a couple napkins, a couple napkins spread out right beneath the plastic, and it does seem like the recirculating moisture beneath the plastic combined with that paper kind of made a little bit of a meal for the worms to come up and take part in. So I think we're just going to jump right in. I can't recall the exact feeding that they got last time, but after 20 days it's fair to expect that the leftovers we find in here, if we find any, will be few. That is, of course, unless we have placed really slow composting foods in here, which we would probably find leftovers of if we did. Sort of like what they're getting today, you know. With systems that are only 122 days of age, I do expect a fair bit of time remaining before these would come to their conclusion. So I put corn cobs on the menu for these little guys today. And in case you've never fed corn cobs to your worms, they do take quite some time to break down. There was a lot of castings material starting to stack up in these systems, or at least over here in bin number 1. I figured I would just kind of explore the outer edges of the systems really quick before we dive down into the feeding zones. At the same time, aerating the material out there. Perhaps last time would have already been a good time to remove the plastic covers and give these systems a little opportunity to air out. Because I just hate it when I, kind of dig my fingers down into some material and then what comes up is stuff that's sort of clumping together on its own rather than freely flowing. But I think we've got enough time in these systems to achieve recovery from what might be considered by some to be excessive moisture. I'm even wondering if perhaps we could blend in some material to help these systems dry off a little bit. I mean, I've got my prepared bedding. I've also got leaves that I bought in from outside, some sort of a material blended in which might help absorb some of the moisture in these. So, my prepared bedding is prepared with moisture, but not much. I mean, it's not terribly moist. I think we could use it here. So why don't we do something a little different than what I normally do. I normally just use my prepared bedding as sort of a foundation to place beneath my feedings, but I'm kind of liking the idea, just based on the amount of castings that seem to be piling up here, I kind of like the idea of just sort of blending in some nice bedding throughout. And while I do prepare this stuff over here with moisture, the majority of the moisture that I prepared this stuff with appears to have just soaked into the paper and cardboard and leaves. So it's not dry, but it's also definitely not wet. So I believe it does have a fair bit of potential to absorb a little bit of moisture into itself. So we still have yet to excavate the feeding zones, and perhaps this will lead us to blending in some of the stuff I just sprinkled out onto the surface. I'm not expecting to see much, if any, leftovers down here, but like I said, there could have been stuff placed into these bins that are slow composting items, and if there were, then we might still bump into some remnants. The corn cobs we're adding today are definitely going to remain into many future check-ins for us to bump into. But other than a banana stem that I spotted when I was plowing through the feeding zone area in bin number 2, I didn't really encounter anything that looked like leftovers. Even though a banana stem does take a little while, I definitely don't classify it as a slow composting item. It'll definitely linger through a couple check-ins in most cases, but it'll be gone pretty quick relative to, say, corn cobs as a really good example of something that's pretty slow. So I think the exploration of the materials is pretty much done at this point. I think the whole idea of just blending and bedding at this point is something we could just plow ahead and take care of. I mean, I'm not going too crazy blending it in all over the place. I just like the idea of there being some of this stuff throughout the bin. This is for sure a definite departure from how I typically manage my systems, but it did seem like a good way to go, and hopefully it'll aid in helping some of this somewhat sticky and clumpy material to sort of break loose from itself and start to become a little bit more crumbly. And then by being covered only with paper once we're finished, I think that should help a good bit too. So I think we've managed to pretty evenly distribute what I dropped in here throughout the systems. And now we can proceed to the somewhat more routine activity of dropping in their food and letting them get back to work. So let's excavate down the middle here. Definitely a lot of stickiness and clumpiness going on in here, which I definitely don't like. I'm sure the worms don't mind. They probably love the high degree of moisture. But it just becomes a little bit of a worm bin managing nightmare when the stuff starts to get this way. As much as the worms like it, and it's probably really good for them too to have a good bit of moisture like this, having stuff that's this sticky and clumpy all over the place just, I don't think, serves as a beneficial thing for my worm bins. So we're going to give them even more as the foundation for today's meal, dropping in a little bit down into the pit that we just excavated. And I'm also going to prepare my portion of grit here, put it out right in front of me so I don't forget it. And you know, these corn cobs didn't want to just pop away from each other easily. I needed both hands to separate them. And now we'll get to the business of trying to distribute this assortment of yummy foods in a somewhat even fashion so each system gets a fair shake at what's been provided. And that to me seems like a pretty fair divvying up of the portions today. I'm even thinking of going to grab my supply of leaves, which I've been a little bit stingy on lately because I'm kind of running out, and I'd like to see the leaves last until such a time that I can replenish the supply. So, you know, maybe we'll skip it. I just imagine that as being possibly another material that could soak up a little bit of moisture into itself, but I believe that when I do that top dressing of leaves, what it really ends up doing is kind of creating a little bit of a moisture barrier, helping to lock in moisture rather than absorbing it. So perhaps we are just better off by swapping out the plastic with paper and then covering up with only that, and hoping that perhaps the systems will release a little bit of their moisture to evaporation and we'll see a little bit less clumping down here in future check-ins. So yeah, you know, hindsight's always 20/20. Kind of makes me wish I had removed and replaced the plastic coverings last time, but live and learn, I guess, right? So I've got a couple things that I need to take care of getting cleaned up and put away around here, but you know, those things are boring. So I'm not going to waste your time with that. Before I go really quick though, let me just say thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. Alright everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.